Thanks, Elizabeth. My name is Stephen. I'm on the teaching team here at CCOF. And I've felt especially honored to be able to say that this past month as we've been in this series answering your questions. And I hope that you have heard what I've heard about us. That we have questions and we want to understand them in our minds, intellectually. And so we engage that as we ask questions about ourselves and about God and our place in the world with our minds, but sometimes intellectual answers aren't enough. Some answers that we've heard this past month have felt difficult, I think. Maybe challenging, maybe incomplete. And so we also desire to answer these questions with compassion and understanding, to embrace the longer course of all of this, and to care for one another emotionally in the process. None of the questions that we have been talking about this month, around why bad things happen if God is good, right? Or our purpose in the world, which sometimes feels difficult, or our sexuality. None of those questions can or should be completely answered in 30 minutes from up front, right? And our question this morning, is Jesus the only way, is similar in that regard. Still, I hope you've heard that we care enough here to start the conversation, to stick with one another through it, instead of pushing those important topics under the rug. Life is complex. A life of faith is complex. Answers around those things are complex. If you hear from anyone any different, you should be wary of them. When I think about that kind of person, the kind of person who kind of rubs me the wrong way because they say that all the answers are simple and they have them all, I think of these two guys that have been part of my life for a long time. These two street preachers. I don't know if when I say that you understand what I'm saying. Think of a couple guys on a street corner with a sign that says you're going to hell, and a bullhorn or a small amplification system yelling that at you. These two guys are special because they're campus preachers. Along with teaching here at CCOF, I work on campus with a Christian organization called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. It's an interdenominational ministry that has chapters all over the country, including here in Arizona, and I supervise those. I've been doing InterVarsity campus work for 25 years, the past 20 here in Flagstaff, and Tucson and the Maricopa area. And every couple of years or so, the campus preachers roll in. And they come to campus in an RV. They travel all across the country, actually. I went to school, I got my undergrad in Wisconsin, and when I moved here, I was amazed to see the same guys. Not similar guys, it's these two guys. Like they're following me or something around the campus. They roll in, and ostensibly their goal is to tell people about Jesus, but they have very interesting tactics, threefold. Yelling, you can put screaming in there too, yelling and screaming, condemning, and puns. So when I was in Wisconsin as a student, their opener was, get ready, you all are going to hell because you go to the University of Wisconsin, was their opener. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. It could work you could use some work. One time I was like, can we talk about this? Not great, but it's getting there. Then another time I was walking by and I heard them yell, you all are going to hell because you believe in evolution. So, as if a student would be walking by and think, good point, right? Like, you put the word evil in that, we should listen to this guy, we're going to go to hell, right? So everyone, by the way, according to these two street preachers, is going to hell. Even and especially, I would say, the Christian groups on campus. So navigators are going to hell. Crew is going to hell. Young Life is going to hell. InterVarsity is going to hell. When I heard that, I was like, yes. We made the list, right? There was one campus preacher day, I call them, where I was on campus with my friend Jay, and I was so frustrated, I was crying. And I was looking at the crowd of students that always gathers whenever these guys come in. I was looking at the crowd, and I told Jay, everyone here, to a person, is offended. And that sucks. And Jay was also in tears and said, you know what sucks too? They're not even offended for the right reason. I was like, whoa, what do you mean? And Jay said this thing I will never forget. He said, Jesus said hard and provocative and offensive things, but he always said them to draw people closer to God and closer to love and closer to truth. This is different. I wish people were actually being invited to engage in this hard stuff instead of what these idiots are doing. That was what he said. I'm just quoting Jay. This morning, as we end our series Asking for a Friend, we're considering our final question of the month together. Is Jesus the only way? And someone was telling me just yesterday, oh, you got the only yes or no question of the series. It's going to be an easy one. And I was like, I guess it could be. I could be like the campus preachers and just yell the answer at you. But I think we need to enter into this conversation with our minds and our hearts. With our intellects, but also with compassion and empathy. It's not as easy as a yes or no, is it? It's not as easy as the campus preachers would have us believe, or else I would shout it at you and leave. We're going to look at Jesus' words this morning. Jesus said, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. He's using the there purposefully, not the. And then he says, no one comes to the Father except through me. This is one of those hard, provocative statements of Jesus that my friend Jay was talking about. See, Christianity holds to the assertion that Jesus Christ, the guy who said this and then lived it out, is the only way to eternal life. We take these words seriously and at face value, but that belief for many can be frustrating and hard and offensive. An offensive thing to wrap our minds around. It can feel like standing on that college campus listening to someone degrade you for what you do or don't believe. You can feel like someone gloating that they have something no one could ever have but them. It can feel like slamming the door in our face. And I keep saying we and our. I don't know if you're picking up on that. Because for a long time, for a significant period of my life, I felt this way. My perception of this verse was it's closed-minded, it's offensive, and it was difficult for me. It was one of the main reasons I didn't want to be a Christian. Because I'd heard this used in a way that hurt. It's also one of the main reasons that when we got this question, and questions similar to it from you all, I said, I want to be up there to talk about it. Because I've gone on a journey with this. And I want to invite you into that. As I have wrestled with Jesus' hard and provocative statement, I felt like I wanted to tell you a little bit about my journey. But before I do, I want us to keep two things in mind as we go into this conversation. One of those things is Jesus says hard things, okay? There's no way around that. He clearly states in that John 14:6 verse, he is the only way. The only way to relationship with God, the only way to heaven, and the only way to life now, full of purpose, engagement, and freedom. That's a hard saying, but no matter how much we may wish he hadn't said it, or he had softened it, he did say that. No matter how you slice it, someone who's curious about following Jesus has to figure out how to respond to this at some point. We have to figure out how we respond to all his hard sayings. The second thing is that we need to read his words in the context in which he said them and seek to understand his words with compassion for ourselves and for other people. We can't just look at the soundbite. The soundbite actually is, no one comes to the Father except through Jesus, right? I think that what happens with a soundbite is that it can be misunderstood, misinterpreted, and at worst, and far too often, weaponized. That's the MO of the street preacher. I want to be different, okay? I hope that's true of you too. I want to understand the statement and how it was said, when it was said, and what you'll find in my journey is I needed to understand to whom it was said. If it was offensive then, let's find out why. Let's search for truth in the context and see if it draws us closer to him or pushes us further away. Okay, so let me read this again. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. He said all three of those things. No one comes to the Father except through me. When I decided to be a Christian, for real, what I mean by that is my freshman year in college, I decided I don't want to just be a Christian because I grew up that way. I grew up religious. My parents are Christians. I went to youth group, and so it was a pretty cool youth group, so it was cool to be a Christian. I wanted to actually be a Christian because I had decided to follow Jesus. When that happened to me my freshman year, a lot of the reason for that was because I started reading the book of John. Like, for me, I started thinking about it and letting it enter in. And what I found was this person that I was really taken by, the person of Jesus. Here was this leader who practiced what he preached without wavering, who followed through with every promise he ever made, who was loving but not afraid to call people out on their hypocrisy, especially religious people. Exclusively religious people, actually. Changed the world in a big way with his teachings and actions, but had an intimate relationship with his followers and went all the way for them, sacrificed himself for the people that he loved, even the screwed up ones. No matter how hard I searched or have searched since then, I've never found another person like it. He is unique and makes unique statements. And at a gathering a little like this, except for it was on a Thursday night and it was on campus within a varsity, a person like me, up front, her name was Amy, asked us as students if there was anybody in the room that wanted to become a Christian for real and follow him for real, and I did that night. And I consider it the most important decision I have ever made in my life. It was sweet. Then I kept reading John. And I started being like, wait a minute, this is hard. I got to John 14:6 and I hit a wall. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. How could Jesus say this? What was I supposed to do with it so early in my authentic faith, so connected with so many people who I loved who didn't believe it? I wanted to be a Christian, and I didn't want to buy into this thing for a little while. There was something in me kind of emotionally that was bucking up against it. This statement and its connotations kind of offended me. And as I look back at that, I think it's because now what I'm realizing is how it was used was what I was bringing into this statement. It sounded closed-minded and exclusive, and I needed to figure out what to do about that, and I suppose we all do. You need to figure out what to do with his hard statements. I had two options when faced with this difficult statement. So do you. Okay? Two options when you feel that, when you hit that wall, right? One option is just lift it out. Just take it out. That's one option you could do. Pick and choose. If things make me comfortable, great. If not, I'm just not going to listen. Right? That's one option. The other option is actually to believe everything that he says, to receive it, and to be okay with wrestling with it, because he's okay with that. So I was so into option one for a while. Pick and choose. Just ignore the parts I don't like. This is early in my faith. lift out whatever makes me uncomfortable and keep all the things that make me feel good. The problem is, I realized pretty quick that the more I read about Jesus, the more parts I felt like lifting out. So, for instance, Jesus was like obsessed with serving the poor. And he asked everyone who followed him to also care about that. If you have something that somebody else doesn't have, give it to them. You know how hard that is? It's okay, lift it out. If it makes you feel uncomfortable. That's option one. You know, Jesus had this way of putting himself in uncomfortable situations to be with people that no one else wanted to be with. And he told his followers to do the same. But do you know how hard that is, how exhausting, how awkward it is to be with somebody who doesn't believe what you believe and stick with them? Too hard? That's okay. Take it out. Jesus was a complete radical when it came to doing the hard work of reconciliation between genders and races and cultures and classes. You know how hard that is? Forget it. Take it out. Jesus, like I said, sacrificed his very life because he loved people. When I was young, I was like, no way I'm doing that. Lift. Take it right out. You see what's going on? See what's happening here? The more I felt comfortable, the more I lifted, the more I picked and chose, until what I had left wasn't actually Christianity at all. It had become some ineffectual, impotent thing sustained by the religion of my own preferences. The other option is harder, I admit. It's to choose to receive a statement like John 14:6, along with everything else he says, and try to understand it and wrestle with it, even if it takes the rest of my entire life. I have chosen that. I choose to take everything he says seriously, even and especially the hard stuff, which has made my life pretty hard. Stuff like compassion and self-sacrifice and reconciliation and his exclusivity too. Is Jesus the only way? Jesus, the most trustworthy person that I've ever met, the most trustworthy person to ever live, says that he is, so I choose as his follower to believe and wrestle with the answer yes, even if it takes my whole life. And still, I've got this question a layer deeper, and I think you may too. You may have 100 questions a layer deeper. I'm going to go with one of them. Another question that I hear often when this happens, and I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. The question that happens right after that for many people is, but isn't that really rude to say? Isn't that offensive? The answer to that, not the rude one, I hope, but the offensive one many times is also yes. But maybe in a different way than you or I are thinking when we ask that. Before I'm done this morning, I want to show you what I mean. Just something for you to chew on. I want to consider the context in which this statement was said, and especially to whom it was said. Remember what my friend Jay said to me? I feel like that this morning. I wish we were offended by this statement for the right reasons. I wish we understood why this was so offensive when Jesus first said it, and why it was so risky for him to say this when he first said it, so it can actually draw us closer to the truth and to God instead of pushing us away. This thing has helped me understand the statement in a new light, and I hope maybe it will this morning as we look at this offensive statement, but that we might be offended about it today differently than they were offended by it 2,000 years ago. See, in 2025, to us, this really feels like Jesus closing a door. In our present context, it rankles. Do you know what that word is? Like makes the hair stand up on the back of our neck, right? Like, ooh, that feels offensive. We're not used to statements of exclusivity like this. We are used to people bending over backward, and we do too, to make all of our statements open and not close-minded and exclusive. Now, the people that were hearing this In the first century, when they heard Jesus say this, the people that were hearing it were mostly Jews, like Jesus was, and they were actually pretty used to statements of exclusivity. They were used to, especially members of the religious elite, making statements like, "This is the only way." They were used to the religious elite saying, "Here's how to get close to God. You need to look a certain way. You need to act a certain way. You need to speak a certain language. You need to vote a certain way, be a part of a political party. And before any of that happens, you need to clean yourself up before you come in." They were so used to the hoops, so many hoops to jump through before they got to God, that so many of them were like, "I'm just going to go fishing. I'm not even going to deal with that." What I want to suggest this morning is that Jesus' statement was offensive because he said this to those people. The people that would never be able to jump through all the hoops. And that was offensive. When Jesus said this, he did so in front of a wildly mixed, diverse, messy group of people. In this specific case, it's his disciples who were old and young, rich and poor, educated and not educated, all sorts of annoying temperaments and dispositions and outlooks on life, these guys. He is not speaking to an audience in any way made up of the religious elite. The invitation to these folks was incredibly, even offensively, open. This was not unusual for Jesus, as I discovered as I continued to read in John. Jesus taught and conversed with and invited people who would normally be dismissed, people who had been dismissed by society, in particular by the religious elite. Jesus lived in a highly patriarchal, male-centric society. But when he taught to everyone, men and women. He revealed himself for the first time in John to a woman as the Messiah. He often turned his attention, his teaching, his invitation to women in the midst of, and sometimes in spite of, the crowds of men. Jesus lived in a society where children were treated as a burden at best, slave labor at worst. But Jesus stopped what he was doing, sat down and invited children to sit in his lap, and when people got mad at him, he rebuked them and told them, "I am not wasting my time when I'm with kids." Jesus lived in an overtly racist and classist society, but Jesus would regularly go out of his way to go to the parts of town that no close-minded zealot would even think about. He shared himself with people that his own culture hated. He loved and elevated people who a religious leader was actually supposed to avoid, and he made those people the heroes of his stories. When he said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life," he said it to everybody, and people got mad and offended. It was, as with everything else he said, radical, and it was radical in its openness because he was opening the door for everyone to respond. For most of my early life, I didn't get that. I assumed that to come to Jesus, I needed to be put together already. I needed to look a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way, get myself together before Jesus would extend an invitation like this to me. But this statement, this radically open statement, has no stipulations except for one: to come to the Father through him. And he said this to everybody that he could, and everybody that no one else was saying it to. If you're going to be offended by this statement, I think my friend Jay would say, through his tears, he would say to you this morning, be offended for the right reason. Be offended by its simplicity, its lack of qualification and caveat, not because it's closed, but because when Jesus said it, who he said it to, and his life of teaching, invitation, and presence, he was opening the opportunity to be with God wider than it had ever been opened before in history. This is the kind of invitation I felt from him eventually in my life as I read through John. To embrace that he was the way to God the Father, to embrace the truth of him, that he actually lived in the Middle East 2,000 years ago. All the things that Elizabeth was saying during communion. He died after living a normal life in a normal place, saying abnormal things about love and reconciliation and humility and self-sacrifice. He died a criminal's death, and I actually believe this, physically rose again. Because I believe everything he said he was going to do. And I believe that he did it. And that if we believe him, if we follow him, if we give our lives to him, we cement our future with him, not only in heaven, but we gain life, we gain that right now. When I heard that spoken to me, a guy who had it far from together, who did not look like a traditional Christian, whatever that means, who never acted like it, a guy messed up and needing someone to value him, who still is all those ways. I don't know if I'll ever act like a traditional Christian or I'll ever get it together. I wasn't offended when I heard this to me for the first time, where I got out of my head a little bit, and I felt this in my heart that it was to me. I wasn't offended. I was amazed. I was honored, and I responded to that most open invitation I've ever heard in my life. Okay, a little behind the scenes. When I got to this part of my sermon, the end, I was like, oh no. There's like a dozen other questions that probably came up during the sermon that people have. I know they have. Somebody this past week said, yeah, but what about all the people that never get to hear? I was like, okay, should I tack on 20 minutes to talk about what I think about that? Most of you will be happy to know that I did not do that. If you have that question, talk to Elizabeth. No, that sounds like a joke, but she told me, if people have that question, I want to talk to you about it, because Elizabeth has given her life to answering this question. I'm looking at some other people who have too, to go into those places where nobody has heard. So you should talk to Elizabeth. She has good answers. I'm not going to answer that question this morning. I may not get to the dozen you have, because I feel like there's one other space I want to go to this morning as I end. I told you there's a question under the question. Is Jesus the only way? Yes. But isn't that offensive to say? Yes. But let's press in a little bit to why. The third question that I often sense when I have this conversation with people is a layer deeper even than that, and I know that some of you have it because you wrote it out and sent it in to us. Could Jesus be the way for me? This morning as I close, I want to tell you, it's the joy of my life to tell people this. That the invitation that Jesus made is not only open, it's open to you. No matter who you are, if you don't have it together, great. I mean, that's not all great, but fine. How about that? No matter what you've done, no matter who you are, no matter what has been done to you, the invitation is open to you. He wants you to come to the Father through him, to receive and wrestle with his truth. That's fine. To find your way in him, to experience life in him. The answer to this third question, could Jesus be the way for me, is also yes. 3 yeses this morning. How about that? And that's why I wanted to be up here. Because I long for you to experience this love of Jesus, the fullness in life that I've experienced, and I know so many others in this room have, the amazing purpose that following Jesus can bring, the way that where there was no way, the truth in your confusing and perplexing situation, life in a dark and dreary world. So, I want to extend some invitations to you as we close our series and this morning. The first one is to keep asking questions. Just because our series is done, don't stop asking questions. That's fine. There's nothing in the Bible that says you shouldn't keep asking questions. In fact, in the book of Mark, Jesus says some confusing things, Everybody leaves but his disciples. His disciples keep asking him questions, and Jesus says, there it is, the secret of the kingdom. To be open and curious in front of me. So don't stop asking questions. The second one is to keep coming back through September. Chris next week is preaching on a second step that I think is really important for anyone who has recently made a decision to follow Jesus. As the way, truth, and life, he's speaking on baptism. And then the following, 2 weeks from then, right before Love 928, we're having a Baptism Sunday. And we're filling the baptism pool up. Is that what you call it? Pool? Tub? Baptism thing. We're filling that up with nice warm water, and if that's your thing, and we want you to come and be baptized. He's going to preach on that next week. Actually, if you ever want to be baptized, we'll baptize you. We love it. If you feel like this is the Sunday, we're filling up that thing for you. I'll find out the name of it later. Okay, yeah. One final invitation I couldn't not make at the end of this. In fact, in just a second, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes during this invitation. Nothing weird's going to happen to you. In fact, I'm asking you to close your eyes to decrease the weirdness in just a second. I just told you something that might be what you really need to hear this morning. Jesus is not only the way, he is the way for you. He wants to be the way for you. Maybe you're new this morning, or you've been coming for the series. Maybe you're not new at all. But this morning, this is hitting for you. Jesus longs to be your way where there's been no way, your truth in confusion, your life in death. He longs for you to believe in that and follow him. And you're realizing, I've never actually done that. Never actually made that decision. I'm going to invite you to make that decision today. I've been to all kinds of churches, and I've been up front and on all kinds of campuses where I've done this in different ways. I've asked people to stand up. I've asked people to come forward. As I've been thinking about, after I asked the staff if I could do this, and they were like, go for it. As I've been thinking about our church, and this morning, I've made the decision to not ask for any public displays like that. I just don't feel like that's what this morning calls for, because I want it to be something between you and God. When you say, Jesus, yes, I want to follow you. Still, I'm going to ask you to do a little something for me. So would you close your eyes? Everyone, no matter who you are in the church, close your eyes just so we can all focus. And when I ask this question, would you like to follow Jesus for the first time? If you feel like the answer to that is yes, I just want you to look at me and make sure that I see you. And just nod at me when you notice that I've caught your eye. I have. So I'm going to ask, is there anyone here this morning where you feel like I want to make the decision to believe and follow Jesus? This is the first time you've done this. I want you to look at me so I can see you. I'm not going to ask you to do anything embarrassing. Is there anyone this morning who just wants to make that decision? Okay, I'm nodding at you. I see you. Yep, I got you. I'm just going to give it 20 more seconds. I see you. Can we all stand up together? I told you I've been doing this a long time, and I know that sometimes that decision can be just a one thing and then you're out. I don't want it to be that. I want you to know that that is a big decision that you just made. And before you leave, I implore you, if you were one of the 5 or 6 that I just saw look at me, to talk to the person that brought you. 3 things, and you can do any combination of them. That, I feel like, is the most important. Talk to the person that brought you and tell them that you made that decision so that they can pray for you. Or you can go to the back and talk to any of the lovely people in the back who have a yellow prayer team name tag. I know all of them, and they rule. They're so kind and wonderful. One of them's my wife. You can make a beeline for her. And other friends that are back there, they want to talk to you and pray for you and get you connected. Or you can come talk to me. I would love that too. Go together with the person that brought you. Go by yourself. You can even do that during the worship song we're about to do. That would be a great time to do that. We're going to sing, I Lay My Whole Life Down Before You, in this worship song. I hope that hits this morning. Let me pray for you. Jesus, I thank you for your words that are true. I thank you that you are so fine with us wrestling with them. You're so okay with that. You encourage questions, and I love that about you and about this series. So I thank you that you have met us in that way. I also thank you for the several who looked at me just now. I pray that they would talk to somebody before they go, whether it's the person that brought them. I pray for them right now that you would surround them with community, with your spirit, with encouragement. I pray that we would all be changed as we consider you this morning as our way, as our truth, and as our life. In Jesus' name, amen.